would have failed.
Alright, what's good everyone? In this video we're going to be breaking down the 3 trades I've taken today. The overall basis of this trade review is going to be giving you guys a lot of insight in regards to how we can validate lower time frame narrative. When it fades the higher time frame narrative, this stems from understanding where price is currently drawn to. So by understanding the immediate drawn liquidity, this will show you where the lower time frame must deliver to then confirm the higher time frame narrative. If higher time frame narrative is bullish, but we have a clear lower time frame drawn liquidity lower, we can play down to that, and that's the overall basis of this trade. Because we can't just play based off higher time frame narrative alone. The lower time frame must confirm the higher time frame before we can get a entry to then play in line with the higher time frame. That will make sense as we go through this video, but that is just a quick introduction. So overall, here were the trades I taken today. As we can see, it took 3. First one was a TP1 to break even. Second one was just a break even trade. Just simply had gone break even too soon, and then the last entry had ended up playing out completely. Now we'll break down everything after we show the trade recording and break down everything in depth after that. And of course, here is the account report for today. Now, unfortunately, it shows 75% win rate, and that shows 25% losing trades, total loss of $30. I had, for my break even back here on these last few contracts, I put them a little bit behind my entry, and unfortunately that counts as a loss compared to just a break even though it was a winning trade. Doesn't really matter because, again, count report doesn't really matter. All that matters is the P&L. Anyways, MFU funded expert account, currently up $22,000 on this account, and it's a 50K expert account, and currently made $6,658 today. So overall, we're going to break that down in depth. We're going to show you guys the trade recording right after I'm done talking here. And then after that, break down every little aspect of it and understand the lower time frame narrative and how it overpowers the higher time frame. Alright, so hopefully you guys all enjoyed the trade recording. Now we're going to get into the overall in-depth breakdown regarding our analysis, our narrative, all that. So I posted two different pre-market analysis. First of which was a public one that I post for free in my fear analysis channel, and the other one is my pre-market analysis. Now normally I just show the pre-market analysis I post privately. Thing is though, there's a certain concept I'm not really trying to talk about publicly, even outside of quarterly theory. I'm not really trying to talk about publicly, so we're just going to reference the public one that I posted, as it still covers the main points, even though it's a little bit more vague. It doesn't really cover anything quarterly theory related. It still covers the main points. The point was that, okay, we have a numerous amounts of low resistance liquidity engineered above us. We're trading within discount of the previous week's range. We have SMT at the previous day low, as well as two additional lower time frame SMTs. So we have 3-stage SMT at the lows. There, I think we had 2-stage at the highs. But the point is that higher time frame market structure is extremely bullish. Bullish in the sense of, okay, let's look back and go back since the start of the year. When we go into any given power 3, so right now we're focusing on our weekly and daily power 3. Now, before we get into that, we first have to understand what our yearly, quarterly, and monthly power 3 are doing. Within our yearly power 3, what do we see? Well, since the beginning of the year, we have a few things. We have our initial, let me just mark this out. So the year started off all the way back here, January 2025. The year started off with just simple accumulation. Following the accumulation, we saw such strong manipulation down, which was this entire run lower. And since then, again, this is just the most basic I can put it. Since then, we have been distributing higher. So if we know that price is currently within the distribution stage of our yearly power 3, what do you think that means going into each quarterly and monthly power 3? Well, we want to see continuation off of that, because yearly power 3, that is our highest time frame. Obviously, we have even higher power 3s aside from that, but price is just pretty much bullish the entire time, anything above the yearly power 3. So specifically, the yearly power 3 is bullish. Going into each quarterly and monthly power 3, we want to see the exact same thing present itself. Within our monthly power 3, what do we see? Well, our monthly open right here, August 1st, opened up, immediately manipulated lower. Now, when we manipulate lower, we have formed SMT with YM. As we can see right here. So within our monthly power 3, we have manipulated lower. We already formed SMT, because why are we looking for such a quick move? Why do we look for only such short manipulation? The reason is because we are in a bullish trending market. Again, within our yearly power 3, we are distributing. We are in a bullish trending market above all-time highs. When that is the case, what we're focused on is not price to rebalance an entire range. We recapped that in previous videos. What we're focused on is simply higher time frame PD array, lower time frame SMT, lower time frame SMT, higher time frame PD array over here on YM. Even though NQ and ES did not trade into it, we still did on YM. That counts. That counts. Higher time frame PD array, lower time frame SMT, and since then, within our monthly power 3, we have been expanding, distributing higher. Due to that, we want to see continuation higher going into the next weekly power 3. However, within our current weekly power 3, it is only Tuesday. Now, within our current weekly power 3, we can't just open up and expand higher. We have to first get that manipulation, and that manipulation is what I was playing today in my shorts. I was playing continuation of the manipulation. Now, that is what trading the lower time frame narrative is. The lower time frame narrative is trading the stages of the power 3, such as the manipulation stage. Even though it fades a higher time frame one, because we know that price needs to manipulate in order to send price higher on a lower time frame, we know that we need to manipulate. We can be a part of that, but only if there's a clear drawn liquidity. And we're going to get into that. So before even the daily power 3, we first have to understand, like I just said, the weekly power 3 development. So initially, going into the morning, we're going to now reference what I was talking about in my, go back to 9 a.m. So initially going into the morning, I was in fact thinking that price was potentially going to start the smart money reversal here, and for the following reasons. And quickly, we're going to show this chart. So as I posted in my analysis channel, is that, okay, we have two scenarios, because again, we were still preparing to potentially expand the market open. It was a matter of, if we do this, then we'll do that. So if New York can see a strong expansion higher at New York open, then at 10 a.m. we're going to look to play continuation off of that. So expands higher. That was the first scenario. Other scenario was that if New York opens and said we sell off, then I'll anticipate the lower resistance liquidity above us to continue being built going into the following days. Now, that gives us two scenarios. The only reason we weren't super strongly bullish biased was simply due to the fact that we have yet to see structure align. Structure is still bearish at this point over the last 2 weeks, or I guess a week and a half. Structure is still bearish here. We have yet to see price expand higher, similar to last week. So last week's smart money reversal leading up to New York open, which was roughly in this candle right here, around this point on this down close candle, we had bullish structure aligning. The 8 a.m. candle had expanded higher all the way back here on the 1 hour time frame. And actually, I'm just going to show the 1 hour here. So last week, after we had formed 3-stage SMT at the lows, 8 a.m. before market open had expanded higher, immediately confirming, looking for continuation off of that, going into the New York open. The issue is, when we look back at today, structure had yet to align. We have yet to expand. Now, it's not a matter of specifically seeing the 8 a.m. candle expanding. It's a matter of seeing what is, what we're fed with going into New York open, and then what happens at New York open, and then what happens after. So since structure isn't yet to align going into New York open, we still have to be open-minded to seeing shorts, seeing stronger manipulation play out. And that's why I gave us two scenarios. And as we can see, market opens, and we'll go on the 5-minute time frame for this. Back here at 9:30, market opens, and this is what we got. Price immediately sold off. No attempts at displacing higher whatsoever. We even go down to a 1-minute time frame. No attempts at displacing higher at all. Very small wick, expand lower. So immediately sold off lower. Now, this is what confirmed lower prices for me. What confirmed lower prices for me was the fact that, okay, we have to think logically, what type of SMT do we have to see in order to validate a weekly reversal? Well, it's definitely going to have to be a strong one, and, well, the higher the time frame, the stronger the SMT. So if we just removed the SMT to previous day low, and I'm telling you guys this now, this isn't always 100%, but more often than not, the bare minimum type of SMT, like the lowest time frame SMT that's going to cause a weekly reversal, is often going to be an SMT with the previous day low or high. And since we just removed the SMT to the previous day low, and I'm going to mark that out on all three, as you can see, all three of them have already traded below. Since we just removed that, with such strong expansion lower, more chances are, more likely than not, again, this is a game of probabilities. In terms of probabilities, we are more than likely going to expand lower to the next time-based low. And that is found here with the previous week low. So this is our previous week low. And chances are, if we're not going to respect the SMT, the previous day low, we need at least an SMT of equal strength or greater than. And if we were to form SMT the previous week low, that's a greater than. That's a greater than SMT, a stronger SMT. So chances are, even if we are going to reverse, we should first run down to the previous week low. So that was my mindset after the SMT the previous week low, or the previous day low, was invalidated, which ultimately led me to the trade that I was about to take. So that's where we get to my intraday, where I stated that, I'm going to show that right here. So that's where we get to my intraday, where I stated that, okay, we'll start off with what happened right at 9:30. I said, okay, weekly cycle, aka SMT the previous day low, is removed. At this point, we're likely going to just drop down to the previous week low. That was at 9:33, which is 8:33 in my time. Anyways, I stated that right here. And I said that, okay, going to potentially see continuation lower to the previous week low. I'm going to see if that's an option. The other scenario, because again, higher time frame narrative is so bullish here, lower time frame narrative is bearish. The bullish scenario was potentially that we would just sell off all the way to previous week low without seeing any retracement whatsoever. And if we had got that, I more than likely would have looked for longs beneath the previous week low. But because we did in fact retrace right after I sent that, I then looked for continuation lower. And so what we ended up doing was retrace into premium of this range that 9:30 had created. right here, trading into this premium 1-minute city. While being within this 1-minute city, we then formed a cracking correlation with the previous 1-minute high, as you can see with the YM. Due to that, that validated me to enter off the next 15-second CISD, as we had seen right here. Now, initially I was looking for price to sell off all the way down to the previous week low, my bad. I was looking for price to sell off all the way down to there. So, and that was my plan. My plan was, okay, we were going to sell off all the way down to here. I'll just trim based off internal structure. And that is exactly what you guys saw in my executions, which we're going to again reference right here. This is what you saw in my executions. I trimmed at this internal low and then left my 2 runners for the previous week low. I accidentally labeled that as previous month low. I meant to say previous week low. Doesn't really matter, just specifying. Anyways, from there, TP1, just gonna let this play out really quick. Trim there, and then got broke even on the rest. Now, fear, why did you re-enter? Well, simple. There's a few things. First thing and most important thing is the fact that, okay, we never actually ended up running out my drawn liquidity. What we ended up doing was just continue to engineer liquidity above it. We retrace specifically back into premium of this range. Now, technically, we put in a new low, new range, but the specifics is the fact that we never actually end up invalidating the whole reason that I shorted in the first place. So we go back here. I'm just gonna get our replay mode. We go back here to my second entry. Here we can see that, okay, we never actually end up invalidating any of the reasons for my initial short entry on the first trade. What we end up doing is, well, trade back into this premium 1-minute city, and then while we do so on NQ, we can see that ES and YM are both putting in higher highs, giving us a more external SMT. Now, internally, we have formed a, well, like I just said, internal SMT. Now, seeing these combined together, seeing us still respect the initial confluences that I had entered off of, I was like, okay, I'm going to enter off the next 15-second CISD. And that was technically at the same point that we formed the 1-minute CISD. So, entered there. And the only reason I got break even, because again, that second trade I got break even, the only reason I wouldn't break even there was simply because of YM. So when I was in this trade, I was enter a position just to show a reference. When I was in this trade, the only reason I wouldn't break even is just because as price was developing, I was looking over at YM. I was seeing the YM manipulate higher, and with that manipulation higher, that means YM is about to remove the internal SMT that I had initially based my entry off of. And that I saw that, I got a little bit nervous, I was a little bit scared, completely honest, and due to that, I had sold my position. Now, pay attention to what I just said. I was nervous and I was scared. It was not logically thinking. Obviously, removing the bearish SMT that I based my entry off of, yeah, that makes sense. But the thing is, we never actually had invalidated any of the confluences for my initial entry. We're still holding the external SMT. We're still holding the initial confluences for my first entry. Nothing actually was invalidated for my bullish bias. And the biggest piece that a lot of you guys need to work on is understanding how to set a predefined plan. So you enter a trade, you set your entry, you have your stop loss, and you set your TP. You have to set a predefined plan. So you have to understand what made you enter the trade. I entered off of, okay, CISD based off all these other confluences I listed. You have to come into that trade with a predefined plan. If specifically this happens, I'll either cut the position or put stops break even. But unless the market gives you that, you have no reason to exit. You have no reason to limit the breathing room that your position has by moving your stop loss break even, or just selling altogether. There needs to be logic behind it, and that needs to be done before you even enter, because I started overthinking after I had already entered, and that is what happens. That's what happens. You have to set that plan before you enter, because once you enter, then you start to let emotions take over. You start to overthink. You start to see things that weren't, that you didn't actually see before even entering, and you start using random concepts that you never would have used before entering. because you're looking at every little thing that could go wrong instead of looking at everything that's still there that could go right and still is favoring your trade and your entry. So you have to set a predefined plan before you enter every single trade. And unless that plan, unless those little things happen where you can validate going break even, validate selling early, unless that happens, you have no reason to go break even, no reason to sell early. And I broke my rules there. However, I recognize that. I'm like, okay, I broke my rules there. I had no reason to actually sell early. I just got scared. From that point, I was like, okay, that internal SMT that we initially formed, even though we technically ran it out, that initial SMT that we have formed had then made this order block high probability. Now, this is a specific quarterly theory type of SMT, and these types of SMTs can influence and can make higher probability PD rays. Specifically here, this order block right here was turned into a high probability PD ray due to the SMT that was supporting it. From there, after I cut break even, we end up retracing into that. Now, specifically what we end up doing when we retraced into that was form another cracking correlation with the previous woman high all the way back here. So seeing that, while we test that order block and seeing progress straight away from that, I had immediately dropped down to a 15-second and entered off of the very next 15-second CISD. Again, I keep doing that with YM. Entered there. Actually, I entered more like up here, but nonetheless, in fact, let's just sell that just to make sure it's very clear. So entered off the next 15-second CISD, stop loss at that swing high, TP at this internal low. And well, that was the position. Now, the only reason that I had sold early was simply because I had entered with heavier size. My stop loss was smaller, my size was heavier. All I needed to do was target an internal structure low, and at that point, I got all the profits that I needed on a single given day. And in fact, a lot more than I normally need. Anyways, that is overall how I made $6,600 on today's trades. And hopefully that gives you guys a lot more insight in regards to how I find my narrative and bias on a lower time frame when it fades a higher time frame. Now, I'll give a little bit of an outlook for what we want to see tomorrow. But like we talked about earlier, we're within the distribution stage of a yearly, quarterly, monthly Power 3. And within our weekly Power 3, all we have done so far since our weekly open, wherever it is right here, accumulation, manipulation. What do you think is setting up now? Well, now that we have SMT with the previous week low right here, SMT previous week low, EQ of the current monthly range, as we can see right here. In fact, specifically, the fact that we're entering liquidity right above it. Ideally, what we see overnight is NQ manipulate down on the next daily open, which is going to be in 50 minutes, or actually in 2 hours. We manipulate down from SMT to previous day low, tap EQ the range, and then expand higher off of that. So there's a little bit of an outlook. The thing is, if we do not form the SMT to previous day low, I'd be very, very sketched about longing. Now, I will update this in overall analysis going into tomorrow in my server, but take that with a grain of salt. That's not guaranteed to happen, but overall, with how bullish the higher time frame is, with how we're setting up with our weekly Power 3, the low resistance liquidity above us, this is looking to be setting up for a very, very bullish market. So, a very, very bullish scenario. Anyways, we'll see how that sets up overnight. I'm not taking anything until New York Open, so keep that in mind, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.